All right. Hello, everybody. This is the 10th class on the Book of Revelation. This is a little bit different a format today because um, normal class time this past Wednesday, our regular preacher Terry was sick, and so I taught this class in the auditorium, but that also means that I couldn't record it on my computer. So we're just going over the same material that we went over then, just to make sure that we have this recording and there's no gaps in the study, and we can put this on the playlist for the Revelation study that we weren't able to record before. So we are in Revelation chapter 12, as you can see. I hope you can see right now, me screen sharing the PowerPoint. But just to review the last thing that we went over last class, when the seventh trumpet was blown in the end of Revelation 11, the kingdom of the world has become that of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. If you see me looking a little bit down, that means I'm actually reading it on my screen. I can see what you're seeing on my screen. And we noted last class that that is suspiciously the same way that the apostles talk about the church when the church arrived, that it is the kingdom of God overlapping, coming down and overlapping over with the kingdom of the world, that the kingdom of God is now, or the kingdom of heaven is now in the world as we speak. And Jesus is not going to begin reigning forever and ever later, but he is currently reigning forever and ever. So that is what happens when the seventh trumpet blew in the book of Revelation. We also mentioned at the bottom of the slide here that God's temple in heaven was opened and the ark of his covenant was seen within his temple. We mentioned briefly last time, and during the class when this past Wednesday, there was a bit more of a discussion on it again, that back when the tabernacle or the temple were standing, you could not see the ark from the entrance because there was a big, massive curtain in between, because there was not that full access in the old law, in the law of Moses, there's not that full access to the presence of God that's in the most holy place. The holy place is split in two, the holy place and the most holy place. And the Ark of the Covenant is behind the curtain in the most holy place. In the tabernacle, I forget how tall the tabernacle actually was, but it's not extremely tall. But in the temple, the curtain is extremely tall. It's several meters tall as that room in the temple. And so when Jesus died on the cross, the gospel writers mention that the veil or the curtain inside the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. So it's not something that someone went in and tore the veil, tore the curtain in two, because it was torn all the way from the top to the bottom. And there's no way someone was going to be able to reach up there. It was a miracle. It was an act of God that he did when Jesus died, because Jesus's sacrifice is the thing that gets rid of the division between God and the one who would put their faith in him. And that is exceedingly significant, and that matches up again with how the gospel or how the New Testament writers talk about the church. Both Paul, I'm thinking very specifically, Paul talks about that, especially in the book of Ephesians, and also the writer of the book of Hebrews. Say it was Paul if you want, there's no evidence, but the writer of the book of Hebrews talks about that extensively as well. That through Jesus, we have access to the very presence of God. And so that, again, that matches up very suspiciously with the concept of the church. So the seventh trumpet is not necessarily the end of the world. It is the establishment of God's kingdom on earth, which everywhere else in the New Testament is the church. So, on to our next passage. I'll read all of the words for us and you can follow along. This is in the beginning of chapter 12. And a great sign appeared in heaven. Oh, my face is blocking it for me. I don't know if you can see my face on the screen, but it's blocking some of the text. So let me just move that up. There. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She is pregnant. Notice the present tense he's writing, because like he's writing as he saw it, right? She is pregnant and cries out in birth pains and the torment of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems or crowns. His tail sweeps away a third of the stars of heaven and casts them to the earth. And the dragon stands before the woman about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is about to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, so that they should nourish her there for 1,260 days. So let's talk about this briefly. Not briefly, by the way. So the setting here is the sign appears in heaven. This is not likely to mean that these events took place in heaven. If they did, they wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense. We'll explain why. But instead, the vision is appearing to John in the sky. Like he is looking up, like it's being projected on a movie screen in the sky from his point of view. That's what he means by a sign appeared in heaven. It's not, we need to understand how or what the word heaven means. It doesn't always mean the heavenly divine realm where God is. It's also the word for the sky. It's the word Uranos, and that's simply the word for the sky. You could just as easily put an S on the end of heaven, and it's a sign appeared in the heavens. And this also applies to the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament as well. Whenever you see the word heaven there, it is also the word for the sky. That's just the word that, So whenever you see the word heaven in the Bible, do not automatically assume that it's referring to the divine realm where God is. It could just mean the sky. This sign is appearing to John in the sky, and he says, "This is what I saw." So we have this woman. She's usually interpreted as being Israel. Big support for that is the crown that she wears on her head. It's made of 12 stars. That kind of brings my mind back to the book of Genesis with Joseph's dream and all of his 12 brothers who would go on to make the nation of Israel. They are symbolized in the dream by stars. So we got these 12 stars that it's heavily implied that those represent the tribes of Israel, and they are on the crown of this woman. So the woman is interpreted to be Israel. However, the stars are already the 12 tribes that make up Israel. So this is what I'm wondering. How is the woman herself Israel if those 12 stars are Israel? See, this is what we run into with the metaphor or dream-like language in the book of Revelation, because it really does come across like it is a fever dream kind of thing. We know that it's a vision that God sent to John so that he could witness that and tell people about that in the book. Uh, but some of the language is like some of the imagery is like whoa and illogical almost at times. So this woman could be Israel, but the stars are also heavily implied to be the tribes of Israel, which is Israel. The woman could be the concept of Israel. We talked about this in the class that it's not necessarily the nation of Israel. Um, and Paul refers to the nation Israel as well as a different Israel in the book of Romans. Romans 9, verse 6, he says, they are not all Israel who are of Israel. And his meaning in the book is Israel, in terms of like spiritual Israel, God's people, are not all made up of the people who were born Israelites. Neither are all the Israelites in spiritual Israel, because whether or not you are of God's people is not determined by who your great 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 grandfather is. It's determined by if you are going to faithfully follow God. You're part of spiritual Israel. And Paul in the book of Romans makes that big distinction, you know? A Jew is not one who is a Jew simply on the outside, but it is one who is a Jew on the inside. I got something on my nose. It's really itchy. Sorry. I think it's a cat hair. So, spiritual Israel, this woman could be spiritual Israel in contrast to national Israel. I know a lot of people, especially dispensational premillennials and third temple kind of people, would take up gumption with that idea that this is more talking about the general idea of God's people instead of specifically spiritual Israel. Um, but, you know, this woman has the children, other children, we're going to see this in the next bunch of verses, children that the dragon is going to go after now that he has failed to devour the male child. Other children. Who are those other children? If this woman is Israel, and if this woman is Israel, then the other children is talking about are the Israelites. But why would the readers of the book of Revelation care about that? They're not Israelites. They don't care about that. Why would they? We know from the beginning of the book, Revelation 1:1, that these are all things that are going to take place very soon. And everything that we've heard about from the book from that point onward has pointed to it being about the church, specifically the church that is going to be surrounded by these events and are going to be subject to some of these events. So why in the world would he be talking about Israelites when none of the people he's talking to are Israelites? You know? Instead, if the woman represents spiritual Israel, or you could otherwise say God's people or the church, then it makes a whole lot of sense. And again, I would side on the more general idea, the concept of God's people, those who faithfully align themselves with God, instead of it being about the church. Because then, if you do that, just being about the church, then you have the whole chronology problem of like the church didn't exist until after Jesus was taken up to the throne of God. So I would go ahead and say it's the more general concept of God's people, people who faithfully follow God. So this woman is about to give birth, and this great red dragon appears and is waiting to devour the child. This uh this great red dragon, the word red, like back when we talked about the four horsemen in the unsealing of the scrolls scene, the second one was on a red horse. The word for red here is fiery. It's puros, which is the word for fire, except the adjective one has two rows or R's, while the noun has one R, one row. So it's the adjective. So fiery. It's the same word that they would use to describe the fiery serpents in the book of Numbers if you were reading the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament. So fiery dragon, probably referring to the color. That's why we say red or scarlet or crimson, whatever version you're reading from. The word dragon, though, is where we want to focus. If you're thinking of the medieval concept of a dragon, winged, breathing fire, you're thinking of the wrong concept. Okay. This word for dragon is the word dracon, or uh, in Latin, it would be Draco, like the Harry Potter character, right? But dracon, which does not mean this specifically like a mythical medieval style dragon, but it refers to a very large serpent, a very large serpent. Um, if a if a New Testament era, first century Greek speaker encountered like an anaconda from Brazil, they would probably say that is a dracon. It's a giant snake. By all measures, it's a giant snake. So when you encounter the idea of the dragon here in Revelation, what you should not be thinking about is the winged serpent breathing fire kind of thing, and like from medieval uh, tales. But what you should be thinking about is a giant serpent, um, not with legs, not with legs, but a giant serpent. And this goes way, way back to the beginning of the Bible. You have the serpent who deceived Eve and got the humans to rebel against God, and that is what this is. That's what this is pulling off of. Additionally, you have other cultures, other contemporary cultures to the Israelites who had the concept of the most people refer to it as the chaos dragon, which would have been a serpent that usually lives in the ocean because the ocean is chaotic and like primeval kind of place. And they are the reason for all chaos in the world. Usually they're thought of as evil. And this goes along with the role that apocalyptic literature plays, that um, it one of the things that it aims to do is explain the origin of evil experienced in the world at the time of it being written. So not the origin of all evil, but the origin of the evil that is being experienced at that time. And we're going to see that when we get to chapter 13 next class. The beasts that the dragon summons out of the sea and then out of the earth. It's doing that thing that apocalyptic literature does, where it explains the origin of the evil things that God's people are suffering from. Specifically for Revelation, it would be the Empire of Rome and the religious cults that reinforced Rome's authority over people. Those are the two beasts. Spoiler alert, right? Uh, and so it's explaining the origin of that. The dragon is the origin of those. So here, the great red dragon, he's got 7 heads, 10 horns, and on his heads are these diadems. Very early on in the book, we mentioned the term for crown. That is Stephanos. That's a victory crown. That's the crown that Jesus promised all of those who were faithful even to the point of death, he promised them the Stephanos of life, the victory crown of life. That's a crown that you are awarded for accomplishing something. To the one who overcomes, I will give the crown of life. This is a different kind of crown. This is diadema, or, I have it in the version here, diadem. That is a royal crown, like the king would wear a royal crown. So just to reinforce the idea that we're talking about rulership here. This dragon has dominion over over the world here. As God describes Satan, he calls him the god of this world. He's the god of this world. But at the time he mentioned that the god of this world was about to be judged. Excuse me. So the dragon, his tail sweeps away a third of the stars of heaven and casts them to the earth. I didn't mention this during the Wednesday night class, but I'll mention it here simply because I forgot to. But the word for sweep is the Greek word um, sure, sure. And it's not the word for like coax someone away. It's the word for like drag, like forcibly move someone away from a place. It's the same word that's used many times in the book of Acts when Paul gets dragged by the mob or by the Jews or by whoever. He gets dragged in front of the authorities. It's the word sure, to forcibly move someone. So the notion that Satan has his own angels is not foreign to the Bible. Jesus mentions as much that it's just sort of a given that Satan has his angels. But here we get a hint of like, how did he get a number of angels to follow him? There's always the idea floating around that Satan persuaded angels to rebel along with him, but this word sounds a bit more forceful than that concept. It's like a different way that it has come to be described is that um, a situation of a power vacuum, that Satan, among all the angels who had a mind to rebel against God, Satan was the strongest. And so he seized the leadership position because if these angels are breaking away from the sovereign creator, then there's a power vacuum. Who's going to be the boss of these angels? And Satan took the place for himself because he's the strongest. So he did not coax angels away from God. This passage seems to imply he dragged them down to the earth so that he could have the power, the leadership over them. I found that pretty interesting. Uh, Satan is a bully. He's a bully. He bullied those other angels into submitting to him. So the dragon, he waits for the woman to give birth so he could devour that child, but he does not get to. This child, here, the one who is about to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, that is just so obviously implied to be the Messiah, the Christ. Psalm 2 is where the line, rule all the nations with a rod of iron, comes from, talking about the Messiah. So the male child is Jesus. Okay, the male child is Jesus, and the devil, the dragon, I call him the devil, but we haven't gotten to the passage where it reveals that identity. He gets caught up to the throne of God. Now, the moment that Jesus was caught up or brought up to the throne of God is like by all estimations, the New Testament writers identify that as the moment that he took up his place as here we'll go back as the ruler who reigns forever and ever. As the Hebrew writer puts it, that's the moment that he went up to the throne of God and took up his seat at the right hand of the Father, or the right hand of the Majesty on high. So that is the victory moment. He did not get devoured by the dragon. Now, does that strike anybody as odd? Because we do know that there is something that Jesus did that could be construed with the dragon devouring him, right? Jesus died. Jesus died. And one might think, if dying isn't the dragon devouring someone, then I don't know what is. But with that in mind, think about what this passage is saying, especially powerful to those Christians who were about to undergo such persecution that a good number of them would die. They were going to die. This passage is implying dying is not the dragon devouring you. Jesus died, and yet he rose to new life, never to die again, and then he rose up to the throne of God. Paul, in the book of 1 Corinthians, 15, says that Jesus, in this aspect, is the first fruits. He's the first fruits, meaning that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to do the thing that he did. That is, having died, raise again to new life, and life that is not going to be snuffed out again. And also rise up to the throne of God. So, dying does not mean the dragon has devoured someone. Instead, like Jesus, it means your victory has been locked in. If, of course, you are a faithful follower of Christ, if you are faithful to God. Very important, very powerful message, especially to people who are undergoing persecution, even to the point of death being a very real possibility. Here in the United States, that's not really a thing that happens. And I suppose that is a blessing. But in other parts of the world today, that is a thing that happens. So this is especially important for people who are in that situation to understand that even if you die, that does not mean that Satan has claimed you. In fact, if you are a faithful follower of Christ and you die, your victory has been locked in. Your victory has been assured. Blessed is the one from now on who dies in Christ, as the Revelation said earlier. So after this, the woman flees into the wilderness. There's a place prepared where she will be nourished for 1,260 days. This number has occurred already in the book, and it is from the book of Kings, 1 Kings 17. Elijah, when he prophesies the drought happens, and he hides out by a brook and drinks water from the brook, and birds bring him food every morning and every evening for 3.5 years. That's how long the drought lasted, 3.5 years. That number, if you calculate it out to days, is roughly 100 or roughly 1,260 days. It's a round number. We understand that the Bible uses round numbers sometimes, right? So it's not exactly this number, but it is around there. And you encounter the same thing towards the end of the book of Daniel, when it's talking about the time of persecution that the Jews would go through at the hands of the king of the north, who is Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the madman, who persecuted the Jews and just killed lots of them. And he cut off the regular morning and evening sacrifices in the temple. And how would you like to guess how long that ban on the Jewish religion lasted? 3.5 years. So we're working with the rough numbers that mean 3.5 years, and that of course means a time when evil is dominant, but at the end of that time, those who are faithful to God, and they're sort of like waiting in the wings, you could say. They're there out in the wilderness. They've been driven away, but they're there. All these bad things are happening, but those who are faithful to God are still there. And at the end of that time, then wrongs will be righted, is what happened in both of those instances in the Book of Kings and with Antiochus Epiphanes. So moving on to chapter 12. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he did not prevail, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God, and they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great fury, knowing that he has a short time. Interesting things here, right? Michael and his angels in heaven are fighting the dragon. Michael is the archangel Michael. That's the title given to him. Given? What? The archangel is the title given to Michael, meaning he's the one who leads the rest of the angels. He's the commander, pretty much. When did this fighting in heaven happen? Also, what exactly does fighting in heaven look like? We don't have any indication that angels can actually kill each other. In fact, whenever we have conflict between angels, which only happens once in the Bible other than here, that is in the book of Daniel, there's no mention of angels actually killing each other. There's just mention of them sort of, this angel is trying to get to Daniel to talk to him, and this other one is like this rebellious one, prince of the kingdom of Persia, is like getting him, like holding him back, not letting him through, and another angel has to come and help the one who's trying to get to Daniel to tell him about the revelation that he's receiving from God. So we don't have concept of angels like how we would think battling and killing each other in battle. Instead, it's like these are spiritual beings, and they have the ability to bar the other from doing something into like coming in conflict, but we're not having angels killing each other. It's like, that's really like, what does that look like? But the idea is that there is this conflict happening. Those angels who are rebellious against God and those who are faithful to God, and they are coming in conflict. And the ones who are rebellious against God lose, because there was never going to be any other way, right? They were never going to win. They lose, and there is no more place for them in heaven. No longer any place for them in heaven. Great dragon is thrown down. We get the identity of the dragon. It's the devil, Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. It says the ancient serpent. This is why we identify it with the serpent who was in the garden, book of Genesis. It was the ancient serpent. That is the serpent of old, the serpent of ancient times. And there's no time more ancient than the beginning of time, which is the beginning of the world, book of Genesis. there's the big question of when did this happen? When did this the dragon being thrown down, all his angels being cast out of heaven, when did that happen? Um, and if you think about it in a logical fashion, right? You don't get anything about the devil being thrown out of heaven in the Old Testament. You might say, Grant, Isaiah 14, right? The star of the morning, Lucifer, being cast down from heaven. Well, if you go to Isaiah 13, you'll realize that that passage isn't about the devil. It's about a specific human being, and it's using the figurative language that, I mean, you could say the figurative language is pointing forward to the devil being cast out of heaven, but it's pointing forward. It's not pointing backwards. You know, all of the day of the Lord language is not pointing backwards, it's pointing forwards. All of the foreshadowing, the types for Christ, you know, type, antitype, foreshadowing, fulfillment, all of the foreshadowing, the types for Christ are not pointing backwards, they're pointing forwards. And it's the same kind of concept with Isaiah 14. You have a type and the antitype, and the type is listed in Isaiah 13. The antitype is the one who that imagery is pointing forwards to. So Isaiah 14 is not actually about the devil being thrown out of heaven, and the devil did not get thrown out of heaven during Isaiah's time. Instead, you think about it logically, this has to have happened at the moment that salvation and power and kingdom of God and the authority of Christ had come. What moment is that? Is that before Jesus's death, or is it after Jesus's death? Okay, so this scene is not events that happened at the beginning of the world. Okay? And it's not things that happened in between that and Jesus's death. Some people talk about what Jesus said during the limited commission, that I saw Satan being or falling to the earth like a bolt of lightning. Well, Jesus's blood is the reason why people have conquered over the serpent, the dragon. That blood didn't get shed during the limited commission. That blood was shed at Jesus's death on the cross. You can't conquer someone by something that hasn't been supplied to you yet. So it's not talking about that time either. It has to be talking about at least, at earliest, when Jesus had died. But I would say it would talk about after Jesus raised again to life again and ascended to the throne of God, because we've just talked about that in verse 6 or 5. I didn't list the verse numbers in the text, but we talked about that verse 5 already, that is the moment of his victory. So that is what I would say that moment is talking about. Now, there's the last part here on verse 12 that says, "Rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them." You know, the Satan and all the other rebellious angelic beings, they've been kicked out. Rejoice. But but what about everyone on the earth? What about the sea, where the earth and the sea? You got the three-part cosmology in the ancient world. There's the heavens, and there's the earth and the sea. He got kicked out of heaven, but he didn't get kicked out of all creation. He's now down there, and everyone down there has to deal with him now. And he is mad. He is mad, having great fury, and because he knows that his time is short. His time is short. This is again the one of the big messages of Revelation, that Satan, he has this dominant presence, but his time is limited. Compare his limited amount of time right now to the eternal reign of God, and his limited time now. Puts it into perspective that you shouldn't be thinking that Satan has won this great victory because he has dominated this world. I mean, this world is not forever. The things of this world are not forever, and we need to keep that in mind. And therefore, the suffering that Satan's domination of this world brings is also not forever. It's going to end, and it says time is short. Excuse me. Again. So last part that we're going to read for today. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the face of the serpent. I didn't put the word "the" in there. That sounds grammatically incorrect. From the face of serpent. Sorry. Anyway, into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for a time and times and half a time. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, to sweep her away with a flood. There's that word "sweep" again. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. Some versions say Jesus the Christ. And he stood on the sand of the sea. So, the dragon, he's been tossed out of heaven. He's furious about it. So he's going to go after the woman. He's going to go after the people of God. The woman, she's not going to be devoured by the dragon either. God's people are never going to be fully conquered. They're never going to be conquered. Like Jesus said, the gates of Hades will never prevail against it. So God gives her wings. She flies away. The dragon is determined to get her. So he pours out this river from his mouth. Yeah, you thought fire-breathing dragon? Well, actually, he's water-breathing dragon. Apparently, that's a joke. He puts out this river to sweep her away, forcibly remove her. But the very earth comes to her help. It's the same concept as when Jesus said during the triumphal entry, people were like, Jesus, you need to stop these people from praising you. And Jesus said, if these didn't praise me right now, then the very hills and the very rocks would start crying out, because someone's going to praise me right now. If it's not going to be these people, it'll be the creation itself. And in the book of Psalms, there's the personification of creation, all the aspects of it, praising the name of God and ascribing to him glory and whatnot. So the idea that the creation itself springs into action to accomplish God's will, especially when no one else is going to do it, that's not a foreign concept to the Bible either. And obviously it's figurative language, right? The sea, the waves, the sky, the mountains, they don't actually sing words out in praise to God like the Psalms say. It's figurative language. We understand that. So it's basically just saying there is absolutely no way that the dragon is actually going to devour the woman. There's absolutely no way Satan is actually going to uh, destroy God's people. He's not going to let it happen. The dragon will want to, but God's not going to let that happen, even if it comes down to the very creation itself stopping it from happening. It'll get stopped. Pretty, pretty encouraging, pretty significant. Again, the place where she is to be nourished for a time and times and half a time. That phrase is one used in the book of Daniel, again, like we already said. And in this case, it's referring to the number of years. That is the unit of time being referred to. A time, 1 year, times. It's very interesting. In the book of Daniel, of course, it's a book in the Hebrew scriptures, so we're talking Hebrew here. In Hebrew, unlike English, there are three sort of number categories. In English, we have two. We have singular, one, and plural, more than one. In Hebrew, you have singular, plural, and you have dual. So a pair of oxen is two oxen. It would be written with the dual number. And that is actually the number used in the passage from Daniel where this comes from. A time and a pair of times, you could say, and then half a time. So you add that all together, it's 3.5 times, and the unit of time is, by context in that passage, years. So we're using the same concept. It's this time when God's people are suffering this persecution, but there will come a time at the end of all that, of that persecution time, when the wrongs are righted and things are okay for God's people again. And that is a great thing of encouragement. John is writing some pretty high context stuff here in Revelation. If you've been following with me from the beginning of the book, you already know that a lot of the book of Revelation is being pulled from the Old Testament, and to be, to really see what's going on, you pretty much have to like know the rest of the the whole Old Testament to catch everything. And even then, no one's going to catch everything, you know? But if you ever want to do a Bible study, we've gone over the last of the passages that we're going to go over. But if you ever want a Bible study that's going to force you to become very familiar with the rest of the Bible, go ahead and get the list of all the Old Testament passages that Revelation is pulling from, and read all of those passages. That's going to take a bit of time, but do that and you will be so familiar with the Old Testament. You will, you know, sometimes people look at the Bible and they say, man, the Bible is so complex and I just don't feel like I could ever get it. Well, this is the way the Bible works. The part that you're reading is building off of the parts that came before it, right? It's like if you're watching this long running television show, but you jumped in like near the very end. And so there's all these things that are happening and you're like, what in the world is going on? But if you were to watch it from the beginning, then you have this understanding, oh yes, this is building off of this, which is building off of the next thing's building off of that, and so on and so forth. And you get to the book of Revelation and it's building off of all the things that came before it. And so if you study all those things that came before it, then Revelation starts making a whole lot more sense than if you just jumped into it cold. And that's the error that many people make, is that they jump into Revelation cold, not studying everything else, because Revelation has that reputation and everybody wants to jump into it and study it before really looking hard into everything else in the Bible. But Revelation really is one of those things that, to understand it, you need to understand the rest, because it is the last book of the Bible. It's the last book of the Bible. Like you're tuning into the finale of a long-running show. Um, you you shouldn't expect to understand everything that's going on unless you have an understanding of what's happened before it. And yeah, interesting note to leave off on. That's not something we talked about during the class, but um, I'll leave you guys with that. That was Revelation chapter 12. And next class, we'll be back in the classroom, Revelation chapter 13. So I'll see you then.